Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of Gear Effects, a new podcast talking about golf fitting, golf performance. I'm your host, Ryan Ballengee, along with my co host, Pete Weber. And I want to kind of introduce in our first episode ourselves as the subject matter expert, and Pete, myself, as the curious golfer who's kind of being part of the show to kind of learn from Pete, but also ask some questions and hopefully offer some perspective as well. So, more than anything else, I want you to get to know Pete in this episode. And Pete is the owner of Cool Clubs in Atlanta and has been a master fitter for years. And we've gotten to know each other through social media and just kind of got to bantering of, hey, maybe this would be something really fun to do as a project and bring to people Pete's expertise in fitting and talking about performance, having guests on, and kind of going down an interesting path about just kind of all things golf and golf fitting. So this episode's kind of all about getting to know ourselves and hopefully telling you a little bit about ourselves before we kind of dig into the first big topic in fitting, which is when do you get fit and why do you get fit? But before we get to that, I want to introduce Pete and just kind of get you to know him a little bit. So Pete, for everybody who is watching and or listening, so this is available as a video podcast or as an audio podcast, but for everyone who's paying attention to this, can you give people a little bit of background about yourself as a fitter? Why did you get into fitting? What drew you into this industry in the first place?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me on, Ryan. I'm pretty excited about this project, and always kind of thought about doing something this for a while. And it's kind of funny how it all worked out for us to hook up to do this. But as far as how did I get into fitting, I've kind of always been an equipment geek or nerd. I've always been really interested in the equipment side of things. I've had a passion for golf, my whole life. I was real fortunate to grow up on a golf course back in Peosta, Iowa, at Thunder Hills Country Club, just outside of Dubuque. And from kind of the earliest days when I got hooked on the game, I was just fascinated with the equipment side of things. This is late 80s, early 90s, kind of coming out of the persimmon era, moving into the metalwood era, graphite shafts, kind of in a lot of different things. I think if you had Tom McCann, who used to be the head golf professional there, when I first kind of really jumped into an interest, I think he would probably tell you to this day that if he ever had to do inventory, all he had to do was ask me, because little 11-year-old me probably knew everything he had in his shop because I probably touched it and looked at it. So the equipment side of things has always kind of been something I've been really interested in. As a competitive golfer growing up, playing junior golf, high school golf. When I graduated high school, I wasn't quite ready for college, and I ended up joining the Marine Corps. Spent 4 years in there. When I got out, I ended up going back to college. Had a good career. I was real fortunate after my last year of eligibility that I had a group of people back home that put some money together for me to go out and try to play the mini tours. And that was a wonderful experience. It introduced me to so many things. Why am I not out there doing it? Well, I gave it a run, but man, it's, as we all know, it's super competitive in the playing professional side of things. So when I decided to kind of transition out of that, I ended up working as an assistant golf pro in Naperville, Illinois, at Crest Creek Country Club, just outside of Chicago. Spent a couple years there and got recruited to move to Tokyo to help open up Cool Clubs Japan. Did that for a year. It was a tumultuous year because that was the year where I had been living there for 30 days when that massive earthquake, tsunami, and the issue with the nuclear reactor happened. So some things had changed. So I spent a year there. I got real fortunate. I got my old job back in Naperville. And then a couple years later, my wife and I got married, and we ended up moving down here to Atlanta. And a couple months into that, I kind of got asked to come back to the Cool Clubs family to help run the Atlanta location. Did that for a couple years. Then I actually got hired by TrackMan. I was the Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi sales rep for all 2018, most of 2019. Did that, and then there was a lot of road time. It was a great job, great company to work for. Can't really even call it a job because it was so fun. But where I was at with life, I've got a beautiful little 5-year-old daughter at home, and put a lot of miles in the car in that role with the TrackMan. So we kind of came up with a plan for me to kind of transition out of the company. and still good friends with all of them today. But then got kind of asked to come back into the Cool Clubs family again. Ended up setting up shop out here at Cartersville Country Club, just right next door to Scott Hamilton, where he and Bill Hassel, where they teach out of. Actually, they're working on building a third bay out here for me. I been operating out of this mobile trailer here for a little bit, but yeah, the equipment side of things, it's just always been kind of a passion. Really, anything within golf has been a passion. But yeah, when I first moved down here, I was looking to try to be a full-time teaching professional. Get down here, and I was like, man, there's a lot of people who are really good at teaching golf down here. But I started to, especially after I got involved with Cool Clubs, just, being down here, I kind of started to sense that maybe the club fitting side of things, there was some opportunity in there to kind of maybe help provide that answer for the team, because golf improvement is such much, is moved into such a team environment for the player. They've got different people handling different areas. That I just thought, hey, that would be a really interesting way to kind of maybe fit into that a little bit. So when I first was doing it, I was teaching and club fitting, but now I'm back into just basically completely doing club fitting. I maybe do a little advising on some wedge play stuff, but for the most part, it's all fitting. But it's just one of those things that, like, there's obviously, for any situation, I think there's multiple ways to get to the answer. I've got my way of doing things. I got my ways of looking at the data off TrackMan, and trying to move toward, all right, can I help this person hit more functional golf shots? And that's a big one to me, is the functionality of a golf shot, not just are we maximized, is it functional? So that's the brief way of describing how I got here. But yeah, it's a real fun thing to be able to do. The fitting community is fun to interact with. Maybe I don't get to interact as much as I would like with other fitters. But there's a handful out there that I absolutely, I'd love picking their brain. I like talking to this, if I can, I want to talk to the scientists and the club engineers, finding out what we can about different things. So yeah, it's just it's a thing. With the way the product cycles work, there's always something new to kind of learn about. So it's not like I'm just set into doing one. Once I figure something out, I'm done. No, got new challenges every time. Every time a new club comes out, so it's fun.
So what's in the community of fitters, what's the philosophy spectrum? What are there kind of like 2 philosophies? Are there 10 or 1,000? Is everyone a snowflake and it's a little bit different? Or
yeah, I think I think to a certain extent, because I mean it's there is no industry standard in anything. So I have this discussion with people all the time about what's the standard length of a 6-iron, because that's what we fit off of. And some company, for the most part, most clubs now are 37.5 inches. But then you get some that do it a little bit different. So some super game improvement stuff might come a little bit longer. They might not do half-inch increments in length. Paying on their G line runs 5/8 difference in length. So I would say, honestly, within the fitting community, as far as philosophies, it's just like the instruction industry, where every instructor's got their own philosophy. There is a framework with what we're trying to work within. There's certain things you have to understand about what's possible, what's not possible with a golf club. So, then tying that into the individual, because, same thing, if you, from the instruction standpoint, you've got certain people that have, philosophies and beliefs on things, and it doesn't work for everybody. And I try to learn as much as I can to maybe be able to honestly help everybody. And I think I do a fairly decent job of it, but I think there's a wide there is a wide spectrum on it. And there's access to information and data and resources that the fitter has, that can vary quite a bit. Because fitting, you have some people who do a really good job fitting that are, mainly just using the fitting carts from the manufacturers at their golf club. And that might service their market really, really well. Obviously, on my end of things, we've got pretty high-end interchangeable system that allows us to put any head on any shaft. And there's obviously a cost that goes in with that. And then there's also the analysis equipment, not just from like TrackMan, but we obviously base everything we do on frequency analysis. And we also have our S3 shaft analysis machine that helps us get shaft information. So there's costs associated with that. So, I'd say it's just as much as you see like difference in fitting fees as well. Yeah. You go to some people, fitting's free. With me, it's not. But there's part of that that's got to go into the cost of operating our business.
So in the time that you're trying to maximize the time that you have with somebody when you're fitting with them, I assume, like, it's not like it's a forever thing. It's not an ongoing, like, week-long deal to fit somebody. You got a couple hours to get someone that's that they can get from the equipment you're fitting from them. So how are you trying to maximize the value that you can get from them? Because obviously you kind of got to know who they are as a golfer, skill-wise. You also have to know, I assume, their physical limitations if they've got them. And I guess, how do you kind of balance those out to get the most from any particular customer?
Yeah, so a lot of that comes from the interview process, because to a lot of it, like, perception is reality for everybody who comes in. Like, but there's also, like, sometimes we've got to maybe clarify some of that. But so for us, one of the first thing that happens when someone comes in, we kind of go through to do a player interview. We get some basic demographic information from them: handicap, age, height, wrist to floor, different, a couple different measurements. Then we spec out their equipment. So we spend about 15, 20 minutes for a full bag of specking out their equipment. So we're getting make, model, shaft description, stated loft on the woods. We measure loft on woods and irons, measure length, cycles per minute, which club oscillates, to give us our frequency matching analysis. Then we do swing weight on it as well. So during that process, while we're going through that, there's usually some banter going back and forth. So I start asking them questions about, like, okay, what is their goal out of our time here today? What clubs are behaving? What clubs aren't behaving? Just trying to get a general feel for where they feel everything is at. Now, fittings with me, a full fitting, like I had one yesterday, takes about, if we're going to go through the whole bag, it takes about 4.5 hours. And that gentleman yesterday hit about 170 golf balls. So not everybody is going to be in that situation. Not everybody's ready for that. But there were some things that he was kind of trying to answer that maybe we took a little extra time, hit a few more balls to try to figure some stuff out. But yeah, so once we kind of get the specking of the bag done, a driver fitting is going to take about, an hour or so, hour and 15 minutes. But, I start off every segment. So we have driver fitting, long game fitting, which covers fairway woods hybrids, then iron fitting, which covers irons and wedges. They'll start each of those sessions, like, for example, for driver, they're going to start by hitting six drives with their current equipment. And I tell everyone I've got a mulligan button. So if they hit one that, like, hey, that doesn't happen on the golf course, I'm going to kick it out. But the way I look at the data is I want to see stuff over a series of shots. So I want to see what are your averages, but also what are your variances within those averages. And that starts to help me identify, okay, is it equipment or is it technique? There's a way I have a way of looking at the data, which we can cover on another episode, but there's a way I break it down to look at it to say, which one's which. Because really I tell people I want to give them my honest opinion of where their best investment is made with their resources. Whether it's, hey, your equipment's good, you just need to go work on your game a little bit, or, hey, your game's getting held up by your equipment. I want to be able to answer that. So we go through that process. I usually kind of start with driver and work our way backwards. Once get driver done, it can really start to answer a lot of questions for me. Something that I've been paying a little bit more attention to and handling it this way is really, I've seen it a handful of times over the last few months that I've really been kind of cued in on it, but getting the lie angle on the irons right for how they want to deliver the club has become super, super important to me, because I start to see a little bit of evidence, like, that is actually impacting how they hit their driver. Because if they're making some compensations to try to make their irons go straight and the line go up and the line goes off, that all of a sudden starts to spill over into the other parts of the bag. And one of the other things I'll look at is like, okay, the balance of the fitting of the clubs in the bag. If there's one club or one part of the bag that's way off, how is that impacting everything else? Like a gentleman I had here yesterday, his irons were essentially about 2.5 flexes too stiff, too heavy.
So is that like going from like an X to a regular?
Well, so he was, it was more like going from stiff to where he needed to kind of get down into senior.
Got it. Okay.
Just from the speeds that he was able to currently generate. A good player. It's just, age-wise, he's at a speed level that he needed something that was going to be a little bit softer, because one of the things we'd see was like he wasn't able to get kind of peak height and the landing angle of the golf ball with his irons where we wanted to. So it was kind of low rockets with everything. Mm-hmm. And so like that was a major concern. His driver, was maybe, flex and a half too stiff, and gram weight wise was 10 grams more than I wanted to see him in. Fairway wood and hybrid, they were actually fairly close to what he needed. So when I looked at it, I was like, listen, driver and irons are kind of out of balance with things. I was like, I think if you address those, there's a good chance the fairway wood and the hybrid behave a little bit better. So trying to get those things right. And that was irons line angle wise was actually pretty close to what he needed it to be. But yeah, so that's, I know I kind of rambled on that one a little bit, but that's a little bit about how I try to approach things. Again, I'm trying to say what can we absolutely sit there and say, like, this needs to be better so that it can help the rest of the things be better. Without saying you got to buy a whole brand new bag of, set of golf clubs. I still get people that want to do that. That's fine. But for me to sleep at night, I tell them, like, you're going to get my honest opinion of where I think your best investment is made.
Do people come with like preconceived notions about what's going to happen in a like the magic unicorn is going to appear, everything is going to go straighter and 20 yards farther, and they're just going to hand you the money, and that's it? Or do people have a realistic view of what could happen depending on their situation?
Yeah, I'd say I get a little bit of both. There's, I'll get some people that, the funny thing is the ones that I'm not going to say I get discouraged about, but it's, the biggest preconceived notion is like someone will do a little research on the internet about a certain shaft and think it's automatically good for them. And then I'm like, well, no, like I had a guy like, hey, I saw this 70 gram hazardous. Like, well, you're probably like a 50 gram something else. That's a tough one. But that's where, I'll start to jump in and say, okay, let's look at it over a series of shots. That's, again, important to me, because no matter how the fit of the golf club is, someone can get 1 out of 10 that's going to be like, hey, great, that one was fantastic. I was like, all right, now repeat it. So that's why I have them hit. That's why they hit a lot of golf balls with me. They have, like, for me to really sit there and say, you've got to spend money on this new driver. You've got to hit a series of functional golf shots with it. So once I kind of get a baseline, like, okay, this fits better, with players, now all of a sudden I'll start to tell them, like, okay, now hit me a draw, hit me a fade, start to work the ball. Let's see if those shots are functional. Like the gentleman I had yesterday, we had 2 drivers that worked really, really well for him. We had the same shaft, but 2 different drivers. He had the Sim 2 Max 10.5, and then the Titleist TSI 2, 10 degree. Literally, like, on the center strikes, just trying to hit the straight ball, identical. They both worked really well for him. When he tried to draw it, the TaylorMade started to dive too low. The landing angle would get below 30 degrees, which is at his club head speed. That's the range I want him to be in.
Yeah.
Titleist, as soon as he did it, the lowest it would get was at 30. And it was still in a good range on on straight balls and fades. So when I started to look at it, I was like, here's the thing now, like, because when his landing angle would get below the 30 with the TaylorMade, he was losing carry. Now, could I sit there and say, let's go, maybe add a little bit of loft to it? But the moment I added loft to that head dip for him, the spin rate got a little bit high. It was one of those situations where it's like, okay, then do I just jump to the standard sim, not the sim max? Now I'd have a concern about a spin rate being too low. So there's ways my mind kind of goes on that. So those are kind of the way I kind of look at things. But yeah, I like to go in with as little preconceived notions about what I'm going to run into as possible. Obviously, I know that people are always going to walk in with certain ideas about certain things, and never want to try to say that someone's just flat out wrong on something. But sometimes it's like, okay, that's the tough thing. I think instructors see the same thing. It's identical to what instructors see. People watch a YouTube video, doesn't apply to them. They try to do their golf swing, messes them up. So there's some of that, which, from this perspective, like this thing that we're doing podcast, like that was like one of my big motivations for it, was maybe to help just create a little bit, more informed customer, more informed consumer about what they need to kind of expect and hope for when they go in for a fitting.
So this lays the groundwork for the one kind of topic we want to cover in this first show, which was when and why do you get fit? And I guess my question is, I'm barely a plus player. So when I go and get fit, I'm thinking about, I want a new piece of equipment. I've run out of use for whatever one I'm kind of looking to transition from. How do I figure out which one I want to move into? And I'm a shaft guy. I've most of my fittings have always been, all right, if we just get the shaft right, everything else is going to be fine.
Yeah.
It's figuring out the spin piece of it. But I think I'm kind of weird in that regard. So as a golfer, why should you get fit, or kind of what are the telltale signs that, hey, maybe you need to go in for a fitting?
Yeah. So like, and this one, my first part of this response can be kind of targeted a little bit more toward juniors and I don't want to say seniors, but experienced golfers. But really for anybody, you can apply to anybody. If you're able to be on a launch mounder, get on TrackMan or whatever, and you're starting to see a 5 mile an hour change in your club head speed, whether it's up or whether it's down, that's always been the kind of the time where I'm like, it's worthwhile to get it checked out if your fitting is still working for you, because in both cases, the golfer could be having to put in extra effort to make the club work. Some people think extra effort is just the fact that if the club's too stiff that they've got to swing harder. Well, it can be the opposite for like a junior golfer who's starting to gain speed and strength. They're working hard just to keep it on the golf course.
Right.
So they're and then they're inhibiting some of their natural athletic ability in a different way than maybe a senior golfer with a club that's too stiff is having. And so in general, 5 mile an hour club head speed, dips. That's the time to get it checked out. May not have to go through a full fitting, but hey, get part of it checked out. I tend to think like if you're a serious avid golfer, you probably want to go through a fitting once a year.
Okay.
And if only like it's just to find out, hey, what I've got still works. Or hey, because over the course of a season, maybe your technique and your tendencies might change a little bit.
Yeah.
And then so those fittings might actually be just toward, hey, this is what I got. Can I optimize it? Because it's still good. Go take that type of philosophy. So those are kind of the general rules, that I would kind of recommend to people. If you're a competitive golfer, get it checked out once a year. And if you're seeing some changes in club head speed, more than 5 miles an hour, if you've seen a 10 mile an hour difference, there's huge issues that could be popping up there with that. And so, yeah. And as far as, because we had talked obviously like what our little topic would be, like when is a good time to get fit. This is something I run into this time of year that I've been running into a lot. I think a lot of fitters do. It's, there is a certain amount of readiness that I think you kind of want to have going into a fitting. Like I'm telling you, the guy that came in here yesterday, he hit 160 golf balls or something like that. That's going to take some effort. So kind of what I tell people is like, try to get to at least like 80% of your normal golf activity. Because you got, like, especially this time of year, a lot of people are coming off from layoffs. Maybe they've played twice in 6 months and hit balls a couple other times. You got to knock the rust off. If your body's hurting after a practice session, it's probably too early to get fit. So you got to kind of get back into the flow of things. And then for, maybe someone who's going through, working on their game, making a change, there's another 80% rule that I like people to kind of apply is like, if you're working on a change and you think you're doing the right thing about 80% of the time, that's a great time to go ahead and get things checked out equipment wise. Again, some things might not change. But if there's a delivery of the club to the ball change that you're working on, making sure that things are matching up well with that. I've had some people come in, for fitting too early in that process. And the way I look at the data, it kind of screams at me as like they need to stabilize the technique side of things first, make things a little bit more repeatable, so that, if they can stabilize the variability in their attack angle and stabilize the variability in their club path, those are kind of the two numbers that really jump to me right away to say, like, we need stability in those before we can kind of jump into, hey, how does the equipment match up to it? But yeah, there's 80% rules. I like to play with it. And there's been, I had a case over the weekend here. I had a guy from in the area come in, and good player, a lot of speed, like 97 miles an hour with a 6-iron, which is 5 miles an hour faster than the PGA Tour average.
Yeah, that's quick.
Yeah, it's speedy. And his clubs were about 3 degrees too upright. So he, and even now he's played just a handful of times, but he's noticing, the ball's curving left, it's starting left. So we put him through a lie angle check. Found that, like, based, his dynamic lie angle on TrackMan was way lower than what his static lie angle on his 6-iron was. So I took a 6-iron, bent it down to about, within a half a degree of what dynamically he delivers it. And I let him hit balls for a little bit and just say, hey, how does this, and the turf interaction just started to change immediately. And the ball started to fly a little bit higher, a little bit straighter. And so, and he wanted to try some new stuff. So I put one thing together for him real quick, had him try it. But what I ended up doing, and I do this in a lot of cases, like if I've got to change someone's lie angle, 3 degrees or so, there's not a high likelihood we're going to be looking at something new unless their clubs were so far away from what they needed. Yeah. So like for this guy, for example, I was like, listen, we need to get your irons and wedges bent down to where, the progression that we want them at based off what we saw at the 6-iron. And then I need you to go practice for like a week or two with them. You got to kind of get used to that, let some of that stuff stabilize. Because in general, his attack angle was pretty stable, but his club path varied quite a bit when I tried to get him to hit 6 shots in a row. And I think what it was the lie angle was off enough that he's literally being an athlete and manipulating things to try to make the ball go straight. Yeah. So that's one that happens quite a bit. That, hey, like they're at their 80% level. They've made the changes. They've made, they're at their 80% activity level. But that's a big change, like 3 degrees of lie angle. So I was like, get them right, go practice for a couple of weeks, a week, and we've seen people have like some dramatic contact improvements within a day of doing that. But I just don't like, hey, you need a little bit of time to figure into that, because my concern in that situation is like, do I start looking at a club head design, sole design on an iron that's a Band-Aid for what he's doing? So I'd rather say, okay, take these and go ahead and clean it up. and see how it cleans up. Just see where it goes. That would be a better, I think he'd be in a better spot at that time to go ahead and look at making a change.
For someone who, for whatever reason, life's got in the way, they haven't done a fitting in X number of years. What's I mean, should you do it every 2 or 3 years if you can't do it every year, or for whatever reason you're not doing it every year? I mean, how far are you gone if you haven't done a fitting in 5 years, for example?
Yeah, one of and I'm going to totally give credit where credit is due, because I got this line from the guys at My Golf Spy, because I think they do a great job with the stuff that they do. I remember hearing them a while back, incrementally, year over year, there's little benefits, from golf club to golf club. Mm-hmm. Now you go every 3 to 5 years, there can be a significant change in how things are being done. The ball changes more than people, I think, realize. Over a 5-year period, there can be some significant changes. I mean, Titleist did the big flipperoo on the Pro V1, Pro V1X in 2017. That caught a lot of people off guard. That had to get a lot of people to kind of reevaluate their fitting.
Right.
So I again, going into it, understanding like some things might not change, but every 3 to 5 years, if there's enough technology change in that period that it can be worthwhile checking it out. There's technology change and then the human changes. I think about the 5-year period, like right before my daughter was born, I can get my driver up to about 120. I'm about 109. I'm about 109 now. I'm not going to hold that over her head forever, but probably for a little while. But yeah, life just changes, and equipment evolves, people evolve. So, there can be justification every 3 to 5 years to really kind of want to take a look at it.
And even not just from a equipment progression standpoint, from a technology standpoint, but should you also consider maybe from your health standpoint? I mean, if you put on a COVID-19, if you put on weight in this pandemic, or maybe you got fit and you lost a ton of weight.
Yeah.
Is that a good time to go hop into a fitting and be like, all right, here's where my body is now. Now I can fit clubs around that.
Yeah. And so like, that's one of the things, like to that point, like working around Scott Hamilton and seeing, obviously he works with a ton of tour players, a ton of top amateurs, collegiate players, their bodies start to, can move in certain ways that us average mortals just don't. And the biggest thing we see is kind of how the biggest thing I see watching with Scott and his players and the better players is, essentially kind of their flexibility around their hips and their glutes. The first thing to go for most of us mere mortals, in fact, after we're done with college, we end up sitting down so much. We lose mobility and strength in our midsection, in our quads, and our legs. And so the pelvis moves differently. So when the pelvis moves differently, the hands are presented to the ball a little bit different. Typically pelvis moves in toward the ball, handle moves up. That's going to be different. Now, I had this experience with a member here at Cartersville a couple of weeks ago. He was kind of still using the specs that he had been fit for when he was in college, and he played collegiate golf. But now he's early 30s, and life has changed. He's got a couple of kids. He's had a slight back injury, and but he's still really healthy overall. Can still swing it really good. But essentially, we had to go with, I think, 3 degrees more upright on his clubs. And that was the answer. That was the cool thing, was like he was thinking he had to go out and spend $1,000 on a new set of irons. When I said, man, like stiffness wise, shaft weight wise, great. That toe is just slamming down into the ground. And the issues he was running into is he'd get these hard turners to the left, and then he could never get a fade to control. Yeah. He could never feel like he consistently controlled the fade. And now it may sound funny, but I actually made it easy, by getting that right, because of how his body is moving now, by getting that line correct, by going more upright, we made it easier for him to fade the golf ball, which can seem counterintuitive at times, but essentially when he would try to fade the golf ball, it was defaulted to try to slice. Yeah. And turf interaction was crap. So we had to clean that up. But that's an example. So yeah, both ways. Like ultimately, if you've had something that's restricting your movement, yeah, getting some of those things, checked out. If you've had some stuff done that's enhanced your movement, very good time to get it looked at as well. So it's not just a speed or a strength, thing. There's absolutely a mobility component to when you want to look at getting fit.
So hopefully in all of this chat, the folks who are listening or watching figured out there are a lot of reasons to get fit. There's not just a singular reason. There's not just a singular time period. There are lots of different reasons that you can get your equipment checked. It doesn't mean you have to spend $5,000 on clubs. It could mean you walk away with just a fitting fee and a better set that fits that you already have. But hopefully that gives people a good sense of kind of what we're going to be talking about on this show. And we emailed back and forth before we did this, obviously, but I think we've got 30 topics on the books before we even did an episode. And just even doing this recording, I've written down 5 more where I'm like, all right, I want to get into that too. So, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of questions from people and we'll try to tackle those too on the show, but hopefully you've enjoyed this. We can't wait to talk more about this, make this a weekly thing. Sometimes the show's going to be a half hour. Sometimes the show's going to be an hour. We'll bring on people. It'll be a lot of fun, but we're going to have an intersection of using Pete's expertise, talking about golf performance, talking about individual case studies that he sees, my experience, and we'll bring it all together and hopefully it'll be really entertaining for you every time out. And I'm very excited about this. I know Pete is, and we can't wait to bring it to you every week. So we'll have the show obviously on pretty much every podcasting service once we kind of get that all squared away, and then after this initial episode. And then you can also watch us on the Golf News Net YouTube channel, and we'll have a link to that on our website as well. And then also, if you're interested in watching our mugs on TV, you can watch us on our Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV apps. Just look for Golf News Net, download it, and you can watch the episodes each week that way too. So, Pete, this was awesome. I'm so glad we're doing this.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And thanks to everyone for watching and listening. And we will catch you next time on Gear Effects.
Thanks, everyone.